let's talk about this performance credit mechanism idea. What do you think about the credit plan?
Well, I will say this about the work the PUC, the Public Utility Commission of Texas, is doing. They've got a tough job. They've got to figure out how to define what reliability, should mean for the ERCOT market, and then create whatever incentives will allow generators to start building more generation. So I think the PCM is an idea that came out of a lot of work that the PUC commissioners and staff have done with their consultant, E3. I think it was always meant to be a framework and a starting point for a conversation. Now the legislature's in session and they're beginning the process of weighing in, and they've got their opinions, some critical and some that know we have to do something, including our own senator, Jose Menendez, who sits on the primary committee up in Austin that will be dealing with this. So I am in agreement with the ideals of the PCM with respect to we need more generation capacity. The question is, how do you work out the details to get there?
How do we get there? Right. Yeah. So if this were, and I know the legislators have to weigh in on it and decide if it goes forward, if it's tweaked, if it exists in the future as it is now. But if that were to happen, if it goes forward the way the PUC has laid it out, what would that mean for CPS Energy?
We're the fourth largest generator in the state, and we're making our own decisions right now about what the future of our generation mix looks like. I want to give credit to our board of trustees at CPS Energy. They made some tough decisions to start the process of moving away from our coal operation, which our community has told us is important to them. And replace that with capacity that'll get us through about the 2030 timeframe. So I think we are doing the things we need to do to create additional capacity to serve San Antonio. The state's got to figure that out as well. So whatever whatever the final implementation of the PCM looks like, or whatever else comes out of the legislature, we want to make sure that a couple of things. Number one, that our generation remains part of that mix and has value in a new market design, and that it doesn't overly penalize renewables. Right now, we need every megawatt of power that we can get our hands on, and our approach is balanced. We've got fossil fuels. We continue to maintain generation capacity, but we're also investing heavily in solar, which in the middle of the summer works great. Low prices for our customers, it's a good thing. So we want to see that balance happen at the state level as well. And so we're right in the middle of these conversations. We're doing what we need to do for our customers here in San Antonio. It also has to be affordable. So we can't overly, customers are the ones who ultimately pay the cost of this. So we have to keep an eye on that too.
So CPS is both a power provider and a generator.
Yes, ma'am.
So for this PCM plan, it wouldn't be something where you're just on one side of the provider stance or the generator stance. What would that mean for a utility set up like CPS?
I think that's a great observation. In the competitive areas of Texas, you have those entities are separate. So you've got one entity that's thinking about the solution from a generator's perspective, and you got other entities that are thinking about the solution from a retail provider's perspective. We're both. So so we have to ensure, again, my number one job is to maintain reliability. I have got to keep the lights on, which means that when I need power, whether I'm selling it into the market or buying it from the market, I want to ensure those resources are there to provide service to our customers. So I probably lean towards ensuring reliability first, with a very, very 1A priority being affordability for our customers.
With the credit idea, these credits would be sold on the promise that power would be there when it's needed. But again, there's the question of how do we get to that point? And it sounds like, at least in this stage of the plan, this stage of the idea, that would be left up to generators to decide. Do we build new facilities? Do we keep older ones online longer? I mean, is that something that CPS is looking at if this were to go forward?
Well, that is probably the biggest question that remains about the realities of the PCM. Will it actually incentivize new generation in Texas? I know we have plans for our own additions to our generation fleet. We're growing about 100 megawatts a year here in San Antonio, which means I've got to be planning for additional generation capacity to serve San Antonio. And and the rest of the state is growing at the same clip as San Antonio is. So whatever the solution is, if it fails to incentivize new generation, then it probably has fallen short of what the goal is.
This would create a really different setup for the Texas energy market than exists today, because it sounds like the incentive here, yes, is more generation, and that's not how Texas is set up currently, right? Generators get paid for what they're actively generating, not what they could.
Right.
So what kind of change would that be for the market in general?
Well, the PCM fundamentally creates an incentive for generation to be available during those extreme times of the year when it's absolutely necessary to maintain reliability. So if you're there, you get an incentive payment, for being there. If you're supposed to be there and you're not there, equally it creates at least a framework for a penalty, which either takes you out of the mix, to be able to provide that reliability capacity, or potentially maybe there's a penalty, payment that you have to make, because the market's going to have to go figure it out at a higher cost somewhere else. So I don't know if that will incent generators to build more generation. I think the main driver is going to be the growth that everybody's seeing. But I left my office a little while ago, looked at my board in the office, and power prices right now are about $8, a megawatt, which is not going to incentivize generation to be built. So we're moving which is good for customers. When power prices are low, customers benefit, and that's a good thing. So the market really has shifted to be much more focused on the extremes. The times where you're going to make money are the times where it's either really hot or really cold. And so the question that investors are going to have to make, who are making these decisions, is that enough return for us to justify building a $500 million asset? It's a tough kind of dynamic, and the state is going to have to play a role in this. The state's going to have to play a role, because there's probably a gap to be closed in how generators earn a return. That's going to have to involve state policy. It just has to.
So it sounds like obviously this is, still in the early stages, even though the PUC signed off on it. We're waiting to see what lawmakers have to say about it. But from all the people I've talked to, it sounds like more generation, more capacity is the answer. The question is, how do we get there? So if a customer sitting at home is trying to wrap their heads around this, there's going to be one key question for everybody, right? And what does that mean for what I pay CPS Energy, what I pay for power? So if more generation is the answer, is that somehow equal a higher price for energy at the end of the day?
Ultimately, there will be cost implications for every customer. And I think most customers would tell you that they're willing to pay for reliability to the extent that it's in question, right? I mean, what would you have paid for power back when we were in Winter Storm Uri? We paid a high price to try to get, the power back on during that time. And, we spent a lot of time over the last couple of years talking about, what we've done since then. But there's always going to be a price to the consumer. That's the only place to go to actually, earn the return to pay for the investment that needs to be made. So it's my job. I don't expect the average San Antonian to understand that their bill's going to go up 10% or 15% in the future. Our job as the energy expert in San Antonio is to make sure whatever that incremental difference is a marginal, reasonable cost that ensures reliability. If it ensures reliability and it doesn't break the bank to get there, then I think we've reached a balanced approach. But there is no solution that is a free solution for customers. The reality is that we have to work with our customers to get to the right answer.
CPS still dealing with the costs from 2 years ago?
We are. We've worked really well with our city council to create tools to allow us to recover over a long period of time. So, a lot of customers in the competitive areas, they saw thousands of dollars of bills go up from month over month because the retailers could do that. Here in San Antonio, we didn't do that. We thoughtfully, created a mechanism that allowed us, for $1.50 a month, give or take, to pay for, the gas costs that we saw, the increase, which we're still litigating, by the way, over time. And we think that was the right thing to do for San Antonio. So we have the tools that we need to recover the costs associated with it as the lawsuits are are finalized, and whatever that outcome is, that'll kind of determine what the final cost is. But so far it's been about $420 million that we've run through that particular tool that we agreed to with City Council. And so customers, the fight that we have made with our gas suppliers on the exorbitant prices that we paid, it has been a worthy fight. Our customers have already benefited from that action that we took.
You mentioned renewables, and when we talk about energy that can be turned on and off quickly, dispatchable energy, is fossil fuels still the way to go? Renewables, my understanding, the technology for that, to be able to access that when the wind's not blowing, when the sun's not shining, just not there yet?
It's just not, well, it's getting there. For instance, we just signed a 50 megawatt battery storage deal that will make solar, much more like a gas plant than a renewable resource that comes on and off when the natural resources are there. But it's not matured enough to the point where you can replace a big gas plant with it. These are new technologies. They're marginal, in nature. They're a little more expensive, so you can't go too far until the price point comes down. So we have to make those investments in the future of what the generation technology is going to look like, while keeping gas to ensure reliability. So we have to keep gas as a resource until those non-emitting technologies that provide the same base load service that the fossil fuel technology does. Ultimately that's the answer. When batteries get there, or if the investments that we're making in geothermal, we're very interested in geothermal technology, which basically pumps fluid into the ground, uses the Earth's heat and cooling capability to run a turbine, and there's no emissions associated with it. If we can figure geothermal out, there may be two huge geothermal resources available to us, but it's going to take some time to get there. So that's why we have to maintain a balanced portfolio. At the end of the day, I've got to have a resource to turn on if wind or solar is not there, to ensure that I'm meeting my customers' demand. And that's the job of an operator of a utility, is to do what we have to do to keep all that in balance.
When you look back at that week 2 years ago during that winter storm, just your personal recollection of what that time was like.
Right. It was horrible. It's probably the most difficult week of my career. I will tell you that when my customers are out in a normal storm that we get, I don't sleep at night because I know I have customers who aren't out. We work really hard until every customer is back on. And in that moment, when the state was dealing with a much wider spread issue than just localized outages, you feel helpless because it's hard to know when the state's going to come out of it. And we were the first utility that got all our customers back on after the state kind of got past their shortage of generation. So I'll never forget that week, nor will our employees. We don't ever want to see that happen again. And my commitment to our community is that I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that we do the job San Antonio expects out of us. But we've also learned a lot from that week. We're better today than we were 2 years ago. I think we work harder to communicate what we know. I think we're more accountable in taking responsibility when things don't go right. And you will see me talk to our customers and our community about things that we got to do better. But we're better today than we were 2 years ago. And I think the last 2 years we've seen some pretty significant weather events, and I think CPS Energy has shined through those events. And I'm proud of what we've learned from 2 years ago. But it was difficult. It was difficult for our community. It was difficult for our customers, for our employees. And our job is to make sure that never happens again, which is why the state figuring out this policy is so important. This will help us ensure that year never happens again.
What are some big changes that CPS has made outside of any real requirements from the state? Anything that you all took upon yourselves to say, this is what we learned, this is what went wrong, and here's how we're going to fix it? Well,
it was kind of a three-part action plan, if you will. Number one was communication. We got to communicate better. I'll tell you, a lot of utilities don't go into neighborhoods that are having long-term outages and talk to customers. We do. We'll set up a mobile unit and talk directly to the customers until every last customer is back on. And that's a change that we've made that has really, I think, paid dividends with the goodwill we've created with our customers. So we're communicating better, number one. That was a big focus. Number two, we've completely revamped the system that we use to manage outages when ERCOT tells us we have to shed what we call shed load. So that system is more robust. We have a lot more flexibility to ensure that if we're ever in that situation again, that you'll see the 15 minutes off and whatever amount of time on. Hopefully it'll be longer than 15 minutes off, 15 minutes on. But we have more capacity in there. We've really kind of scaled back what we consider to be a critical customer to just hospitals and military and national security stuff, so that we can put as much capacity into that system as we need to be able to manage the outages, so we can handle a Uri event where the customers won't experience the same experience as they experienced last time, is the second aspect of it. And the third is now ERCOT comes to San Antonio, to our power generation facilities every year and inspects the winterization that Senate Bill 3 required after the last legislative session. So we're not leaving anything up to chance. There's a regulatory obligation to winterize our power plants to ensure that in the December to February-ish timeframe, when things get pretty cold around here at times, that our plants are going to run. And by and large, they have, because of the weatherization effort that we've put into it. So, just those three things alone are really get us 90% of the way there. Now the question becomes, how can we incent additional capacity, which is, the subject of the PCM.
Anything I missed that you think is important for people to understand about this idea that's out there to get us to more generation or changes from CPS?
Well, we all are responsible for keeping an eye on reliability. I mean, I own it as the leader of CPS Energy, but our customers need to be paying attention to the policy that our state, lawmakers and our regulatory agencies are making. There will be an impact, and we will communicate whatever that impact might be to our customers so they understand why it's necessary. But I think conversations like this to ensure that the public is given an opportunity to at least hear some of the things that are being talked about, I think is really important. And we're going to continue to do our own job to educate our customers about how these changes might impact them. So we've got a lot of work to do still. There's a long legislative session ahead of us. They don't finish up till May, and they're really kind of just getting going right now. So the next 2 months, I think, will really kind of be telling on where we go from here. And if the legislature doesn't act, which I'm really hopeful is not the case, but it's very possible that no bill ends up coming out of the legislature that's going to provide direction. And if that happens, then it's going to revert back to the PUC to ultimately make these decisions, and we'll have to be to be involved there to ensure that our community is represented. So either way, there are changes coming. It just depends on kind of who weighs in when and the timing. I mean, I don't think these are decisions even after the legislature finishes up their work. I think it's going to be probably a couple of years before we really see the results of whatever happens. You can't flip a switch, no pun intended, and a power plant just pop up. It takes 3, maybe 4 years for new generation to be built. There's supply chain challenges that we're facing. Costs are going up. So there's a lot of dynamics that determine how quickly you can get new capacity on. So once decisions are made, then investors start deciding, how they're going to make those investments. And it's not a quick solution. These are solutions that are going to take kind of years to materialize, which means we got to start right now.
Rudy, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.